In this presentation, I'm going to go over how to use Excel to work with non-Excel files. For example, what are called delimited files and fixed width files. Now, before we get into the actual mechanics of working with these things, I want to give you an idea of why they are used and why this is something you need to know. So to do this, I've created a new Excel file with no content in it, and I'm going to open it in a program called Notepad. Notepad is what's called a text editor. That means that all it does is let you edit text files. It doesn't have any of the kind of formatting options that you have in a word processing program like in Microsoft Word. Now you can see here that this Excel file, despite my having put nothing in it, still has a lot of information. Information that's completely non-human readable. This content gives Excel a lot of basic information like what type of file this is, what the default settings for things like font size and column widths are, and so forth. One thing that makes this an issue is that this information is proprietary. The details are specific to Microsoft, and Microsoft changes them whenever they feel it's necessary. Now, when researchers want to share data with each other, they want to be able to do it in a way that isn't dependent on a proprietary format like Microsoft Excel's. When they share data, they commonly do it using simple text files. Now, these files follow a common standard format, so they're very easy to create, and they're also usually very small compared to Excel files. Now, when researchers are sharing data, it's usually in the kind of row and column format that you see in Excel files. So they need a way to convey where a row begins and where a column begins within a text file that doesn't allow any kind of formatting. Now, one way that's done is with what's called a delimited file. I have an example here, which I'm going to open in Notepad first so that you can see what the raw text looks like. And you can see from the column headings that this data has two columns, one for pressure and one for weight. And if you look closely, you'll see that each line is made up of two numbers separated by a comma. And the comma is what's called a delimiter, and it's used to separate individual pieces of data in the file. Now, if we go over to Excel and try to open this file, you'll see that it doesn't appear in the list of files in this folder. The reason for that is that Excel naturally defaults to looking for Excel files. So to find our text file, I'm going to go to this file type drop-down box and change it from Excel files to text files. And when I do that, you'll see that all of my text files now appear in the list. So I'm going to select my comma delimited file, and what you see is that Excel recognized that this appears to be a delimited file. Now I'm going to accept the delimited option and click on Next. And now Excel is asking me to tell it what the delimiter is. Now it's defaulting to tab, which is not how our file is set up. Our file uses commas, so I'm going to uncheck the tab option and check the comma option. And notice how Excel is giving me a little preview based on my choice. And what I'm seeing there looks like I expect my data to look like. So now I'm going to click the Next button again. And I'm going to accept Excel's default formatting options for each of the columns. And you can see how the file is now open in Excel. And Excel has properly split up the data into individual rows and columns. Now, the second commonly used type of text data file is called a fixed width file. I have an example of that here. And again, I'm going to open it up in Notepad so that you can see what the raw text looks like. Now, notice how there are no delimiters here, no commas, for example. However, each column appears to have a fixed size or width. So now I'm going to switch back over to Excel and open the file here. And again, Excel is helping us out here. It didn't see anything that it thought could be a delimiter, so now it's suggesting that this looks to it like a fixed width file. I'm going to accept that option and click on the Next button. And here's where things can get a little challenging. Excel has tried to figure out where the columns begin and end, but this can be a little hit or miss. you need to go and check and make sure that it's splitting everything up in the right places. With this kind of file, it's common for you actually to be given, in addition to the data file, a file with a description that tells you exactly how wide each of the columns is, so you aren't put in the position of kind of scanning through the data, trying to make your best guess for where the dividers go. Now, if you disagree with Excel's parsing of the file, you can make changes by just dragging the dividers to different positions. Once you're satisfied that you have the columns defined correctly, you can click on the Next button, and you get the same options to format each column that you did with a delimited file. And then you can click on the Finish button, and the file will open. Now, from here, you can start making any changes that you want, for example, by adding totals, or by adding formatting on the content. Now, notice what happens when I try to save my work. All right? Excel is warning me that I'm working with a text file, and while it was willing to use its calculation and formatting features on the content, this is still just a text file. So if I save my work, some of those features may be lost. Now, to keep my work, I'm going to select the File menu, and I'm going to click on the Save As option. From here, I can go to the Save As Type drop-down box and tell it that I want to convert this to an Excel file. And now I'm able to save, and it's going to save all of my changes. Now this is a true Excel file rather than just the plain text file that we started out with.